Happy Sunday and welcome to another episode of the Generalist CCFP 105 Topics Podcast. I'm Caleb Dusdahl, FM resident out of Calgary, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Kajsa Hayes.
Hi, thanks for having me. So my name's Kajsa. I'm one of the Yellowknife Family Practice residents in the first year of the program up in the Northwest Territories.
Awesome. Thank you. We're so glad to have you. This is the second episode written by Kajsa. Our episode today was researched and written by Kajsa, and so she will get us started. A little bit of housekeeping before we do get started. We had a sudden surge of people checking out the website and the podcast from Malaysia, so I just wanted to get a shout out. Thank you. If you want anything, give us a shout at hello@thegeneralist.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
We like picking up supporters from all different types of places. So today we're talking about bad news. It's the CCFP topic number 10. Primary caregivers are often the practitioners who know patients and their families best. We have longitudinal care with them. We see them through the ups and downs of their lives. We're commonly the ones who pick up on the early stages of illness and who help identify serious conditions before they get diagnosed. But what about communicating those diagnoses with them? Medical training teaches you about the diagnostics, treatment of diseases, but it often places less emphasis on training learners to deal with these really complex communication tasks.
Too true. They say medicine is an art and a science, and breaking bad news to patients is definitely one of the art forms that we need to figure out and you need to develop your own approach for. You're communicating to patients what they don't want to hear. That's a tough thing to do. So your word choice, your tone, speed of language, body language, and all the expressions that you might unconsciously use will develop, and they'll feel more comfortable as you have more of these encounters. It's going to take practice, comfortability, and having a good relationship with the patient.
In this episode, we will go through the SPIKES, SPIKES, 6-step protocol for delivering bad news to illustrate the four main objectives for this CCFP topic. The objectives are as follows.
1. When giving bad news, ensure that the setting is appropriate and ensure the patient's confidentiality. This represents the first S in that SPIKES mnemonic.
And number 2, give bad news in an empathetic, compassionate way, allowing enough time and providing translation as needed. This is the I, the K, and the E in SPIKES.
Number 3, obtaining patient consent before involving their family. Remember, they're the boss here, and this is the next S in your SPIKES.
And 4, the final 4, after giving bad news, arrange definitive follow-up opportunities to assess for impact and understanding. This is the last S in SPIKES.
Awesome. So first and foremost, what is bad news, and when should we think about a specific approach to how we communicate this information to the patient?
Delivering information that is sensitive is all about perception and expectation. We expect most patients will be devastated by a diagnosis of cancer, but what about COPD? What about the first diagnosis of heart failure, diabetes, fertility, genetic tests, or even STIs?
Our communication of illness is complicated by the patient's expectations, their fears, and previous experiences. What might not even affect one patient could be devastating to the next. That's one of the reasons why, as family doctors, knowing your patient well can be so helpful in knowing how carefully you may need to approach this communication task.
The SPIKES approach for delivering bad news was developed by Bale et al. At the University of Texas and Toronto Sunnybrook Regional Cancer Center. And the article, which I highly recommend people go and check out if they're interested and kind of want a refresher on this, was published in The Oncologist in 2000. And it's a short but great read to familiarize yourself with the background of this topic. So they outline 4 goals of delivering bad news in this kind of bad news delivery interview. Their number 1 goal is to gather information from the patient, their knowledge, expectations, and willingness or capacity to receive information that you're about to give them. Number 2 is providing information that's compatible with the patient's needs and desires. This is so key. Number 3, support the patient by reducing emotional impact and the isolating experience of receiving this bad news in the first place. And number 4, develop a strategy in the form of a treatment plan, taking all of the things that you've gathered from the patient or the main goals with collaboration from this patient.
If you focus on these 4 major tasks, you are set to effectively communicate the main information the patient's going to need to make them feel heard, understood, and to strengthen their sense of support going forward. That was the intro. Let's move on to step 1. Step 1, the S for setting up the interview.
This includes physical as well as mental and emotional setup. So arrange a private place, some kind of comfortable seating and arrangement so you can face the patient and anyone who they bring with them into the room.
If you examine them previously, give them a chance to get dressed first.
Really important, especially when you're doing invasive examinations, make sure the patient's comfortable in their own clothes. Something that's also really important but often overlooked is having tissues already in the room. Nothing stalls your train of thought like running around the ward trying to find a tissue box halfway through the interview when the patient you're talking to is in desperate need of Kleenex.
Too true. Also, involving a significant other or close friend can be super helpful in providing support to the patient and helping them remember what was discussed. As the CCFP objectives appropriately set out, the patient has to consent before family is involved. Ask the patient if there's someone they would like to have there, even if it means having them on a video chat or on the phone.
Which I guess is all the much more important during COVID times.
Amen.
So turn your phone off or on silent, or choose a time preferably when you're not on call, or let someone else be on call for the duration of the conversation. The BC Cancer Serious Illness Conversation Guide is a great resource for patient-tested language. And the phrase that they recommend for setup is,
I'd like to talk about what's ahead with your illness and do some thinking in advance about what's important to you so we can be sure we provide you with the care you want. Is this okay?
It's a bit wordy, but it really encompasses so many things. Plan for the conversation, the reasoning for even having this conversation in the first place, and then establishing support for the patient and inviting them into the conversation.
And one thing I would add is some of the palliative specialists mentioned that they carry around this guide in their pocket and they literally read it verbatim, and it does not come across as robotic at all, even though you might feel like it is when you're reading it. Step 2. P is for perception of patient. This is part of the first goal, gathering information from the patient on their knowledge about the medical condition which you are going to discuss so you can both be on the same page. As with any interview, open-ended questions are the best way to allow the patient to illustrate their understanding. A few ways to word this are,
what have you been told about your medical condition and what lies ahead?
or,
what do you think has been going on thus far?
Based on this information, you can address various misconceptions or recognize the advanced or minimal understanding that the patient might have and adjust your strategy accordingly.
The CCFP objectives outline the importance of recognizing when translation services are needed. And this can not only apply to language translation, but also, and probably more commonly, translation of medical information into easy to understand language, which we know is always a problem for us, but we need to make a really concerted effort to make things easy to understand for people.
Use an official translation service if it's available in your hospital or your clinic or facility, and watch your patient during the process for clues of misunderstanding. Check in with them frequently to make sure that they're capturing what you're suggesting and that they're not just saying yes because it's polite. Step 3. I is for invitation from the patient.
We understand that most patients want to know the full and honest truth about their diagnoses, but a select few may only want to know certain details. A question such as,
how much information do you want to know about your condition and what lies ahead?
Can be a good starting point. Some may want you to share information with their family members or a friend, but just ensure that this is consented by the patient before and document this accordingly.
This step can get really difficult from an ethical perspective if the patients don't want all the information, but informed consent is required for treatment plans. Call your friendly hospital or regional medical ethics team if difficult situations arise where you might need guidance around this. Step 4. K is for knowledge and information for the patient.
This is where we try and accomplish goal 2, sharing information with the patient in a way that is compatible with their understanding and their wishes.
I want to share with you my understanding of where things are with your illness.
This is a good reciprocal phrase to use after exploring the patient's own understandings.
Start with the level of comprehension and vocabulary of the patient and limit technical medical terms where you can.
Allowing for periods of silence and leaving space for contemplation throughout can also be really helpful.
As primary care physicians, we may not know exactly what is to be expected for a specific condition until the patient sees a specialist. For these situations of prognostic uncertainty, a phrase such as,
it can be difficult to predict what will happen with your illness. I hope you will continue to live well, but I'm worried that you could get more sick, and I want to ensure we are prepared if that happens.
Can be helpful to frame the conversation. Step 5. E is for empathy and responding to patient emotions.
Patient emotions and reactions will vary greatly, as you can imagine, and it's important to be flexible with your approach to mirror the needs of the patient. Observe emotion they may exhibit, offer a tissue, silence, hand on the arm, or what you sense is appropriate given the situation and given your relationship with that patient as well. It might be helpful to name the emotions you see, such as,
I see this is upsetting to you and not what you wanted to hear. Tell me what you're thinking.
This goes a long way in helping the patient feel heard. It makes them feel less isolated. It supports them, and it also allows them to elaborate on their feelings.
Step 6, S, is for strategy and summary.
In order to have an appropriate plan forward, we must explore key topics with the patient about their goals of care. This looks different for each patient and disease process, of course, but key topics still remain the same. BC Cancer, again, has a great list of topics and ways to word these, including goals, fears and worries, sources of strength, critical abilities to the patient, trade-offs that might be amenable to them and to family.
We want to know what the patient's most important goals are if their health condition worsens. We want to know their biggest fears and their worries about the future of their health. What gives them strength going forward? What are their most important abilities that are critical to their life?
If they are to get sicker, how much are they willing to go through for the possibility of gaining more time? How much does their family know about their priorities and wishes? These questions are really important in directing the patient's goals of care and treatment plan, and can also change over time, so are a good thing to revisit.
So relating this to your difficult conversation then is summarizing the conversation. Reiterate what you heard from the patient about what's important to them. This is helpful to establish your plans going forward. Reaffirm support for the patient by saying something like,
"We will be here for you every step of the way."
This will strengthen the knowledge that there is a team behind them and that you're on that team with them.
Patients who have a clear plan, clear communication of this, and appropriate follow-up are always less likely to feel anxious and uncertain about the future. So thanks everyone so much for joining Caleb and I. Thanks for listening into this guide on the CCFP topic number 10, bad news. And we hope that our spikes approach, along with a few key phrases and resources, will give you the confidence and comfortability to initiate these really critical conversations and help patients navigate complex illnesses. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye.